Hi, my name is Renee Kaikkonen. I'd like to talk to you today about children with special needs, variety of diagnoses, therapies, and then individual education plans, along with some of my personal experience and life experience that I've accumulated over the years. One of the common things you'll hear today is autism. Autism is a neurodevelopmental neural disorder. It's all within the brain. And you're going to find that as a common theme without any diagnosis. The brain is what runs everything in our body, whether it's physical or emotional or mental. That's the head of the operation. So if there's something that's not connected, the traditional route, or there's something missing or damaged or whatever the case may be, that's where a lot of these different special needs things come from. And when it comes to autism in society today, it is so prevalent, and it is such a symptom-based diagnosis. When I say symptom-based diagnosis, I mean it can't really be evaluated by a lab test. You can't really find it in the genetic markers. You may know that so-and-so also had that particular diagnosis or had that personality type, but it's really a tough one. There's such a wide spectrum from mild to severe that it's hard to diagnose, but it is also not necessarily a bad diagnosis, because today it is recognized as a legitimate diagnosis and it will open doors. So if you don't really know what exactly is going on with a child, but you do know they need some additional help, and developmentally delay won't cut it when it comes to insurance or school systems or some therapies or things like that. You need some type of diagnosis on there, and that diagnosis can open doors. Some of the other things that I've found that's a common characteristic for all children with special needs, not necessarily all, but it's very common that you would see if you went to a special needs classroom or a kids group home or whatever the case may be, is a lot of these kids have really good receptive language. They totally understand what you're saying. They know what's going on, and they just might not be able to tell you. They have a hard time expressing themselves for whatever reason. Maybe it's, within the speech, whatever. There's something that they can't really tell you, or maybe they just are a little bit delayed in that it takes them a little bit for that thought to get to words. Just like as, for myself, sometimes it's processing, well, it's not coming out. Another thing is I may need more time to learn a task. So, some of us learn faster than others, and sometimes they have to repeat something hundreds and hundreds of times before they understand it and get it. Other times, they'll just be right on track with their peers and just catch on with that. Maybe they need modified tests. For example, my son can keep up with a modified test with things like science and social studies, but when it comes to like reading, he's 15 and he's at like a first grade level for reading. And then when it comes to math, he can count. He can memorize how to count, but he doesn't use the numbers functionally. So his only really concern with numbers is that money comes out of the ATM. Other than that, he really doesn't care where the numbers come from, as long as that machine still spits out the money. Another thing that's common across most children is you have to watch out for safety. With some of these special needs kids, you just may need to watch out for safety longer than you traditionally would with a kid of their peers. But you just always kind of have to keep your eye out, and you'll know when each child is unique. You'll know when they're ready, where you may not have to have all the safety precautions that you may have already once have in place. Something you can do is if you have a sneaky child, and this can work for teenagers too that don't have kids with special needs, is a bedroom alarm. We have a child that thinks that in the middle of the night he should just go to the backyard and play if he can't sleep. So, thank God it's innocent enough that he just went to the backyard and played, but we ended up having to put a bedroom alarm on his door. So it'll ding to alert us if he leaves that room. Not a bad idea for any teenager. Another thing is social skills. A lot of times these kids tend to or prefer to interact with adults versus their peer group. And I was thought about this over the years, and really when I think about it, all his therapies and school and things like that, it's always been one-on-one with adult. He so enjoys that one-on-one attention with an adult. And when it comes to the peer group, he'll let somebody play alongside him. He'll let somebody come up and start to interact with him, but he is not going to initiate it. He's not going to go up to a peer and ask them to play with him. He will certainly ask an adult and tell them to sit down or play Legos or puzzles or whatever the case may be. But that peer thing is just never really developed. I don't know. Pretty soon he'll be an adult, so it won't be a concern anymore. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. The other thing that these kids may need help with is activities for daily living. It may be buttons or zippers or whatever the case may be. You don't want to under-challenge them, but you don't want to over-challenge them either. Under-challenge, over-challenge. It's the right pace. I mean, you want them to try to zip it up or hook the button. But you don't want to just make them do it and have them sit there for an hour and try to zip something up that they physically can't do. For my son, I have to just start the bottom of it. He can't hook the bottom of the zipper. But once that's, he can finish zipping it up. So each child is unique, and you really have to kind of modify things, and things are always changing. Once they master a skill, move on to the next skill. We're talking about the different diagnoses here and similarities or non-similarities to autism. One example is Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome also has a trend that the child appears to be right on track, and then later on, after a few years, falls off and is starting to be showing signs of developmental delay. It's also considered what you call a subdiagnosis or a subcondition of autism. They kind of go hand in hand. Another one is microcephaly. The Journal of Medical Genetics notates microcephaly is the clinical finding of a head circumference measurement greater than 3 standard deviations below the population mean for age and sex. It is usually accompanied by mental retardation, and there are many diagnoses with both environmental and genetic etiologies. So it literally means small head. So when you're at the doctor's office and they're like, your child is in the 90th percentile for height, the 50th percentile for weight, and then they get to the head size and they're like, he's not even on the chart. So you have the chart here, so here's 0, here's 90, or 100. So for height, they're up here. With the 90% of their peers, they're on, they're a tall kid, they're on the chart. 58% for weight, okay, means he's, with 50% of his peers his age, he's in that range of group. And then when you're talking about standard deviations below, his head size is really not even on the chart. It's like below 0. So, like with my son, his soft spot closed early. It wasn't fused, but his head stopped growing at a young age. And so his brain is smaller than other kids his age. And so they call that microcephaly. Another thing that is out there that can be genetically tested for is Fragile X syndrome. Fragile X also can have some commonalities with autism diagnoses, and it's something that you can genetically test for. Another disorder is Angelman syndrome. Angelman syndrome is also known as happy puppet syndrome. And what that is happy puppet syndrome or Angelman syndrome. It was called that because the person that first notated it is that these people had frequent bouts of laughter for no apparent reason, and they're smiling all the time. I mean, you just never know what's going to tickle their funny bone. They're just plain happy. And the other thing is that they often are nonverbal or have limited vocabulary. They may also have an odd gait or balance issues. They may or may not have seizures. And then also with Angelman syndrome, microcephaly is also noted within there, or smaller head size. And so, with Angelman syndrome, 2 times my son was tested for Angelman syndrome. Once at 4 years old and once at 8 years old. So at 4 years old, the neurologist was like, sure. She's like, okay, he has all these things, blah, 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 blah. We're going to do this genetic test and we're going to send it. The genetic test came back with nothing. He didn't test for Angelman syndrome or anything else for that matter. The only thing that was really physically testable was his head size. Okay, so we're moving on. And then about 8 years old, she's like, okay, the Mayo Clinic's had some advancements. There's been advancements in this genetic testing. Let's send the labs again. So we sent the labs again. Again, negative. He did not have anything within his genetic markers that they could match up. And so, this really, was puzzling to both of us because I really looked at all that syndrome list and I really thought, he really does have this Angelman's. And he didn't. But if you also take that syndrome list and you put it next to autism, he has a diagnosis on his list too of autism, but there's no test for it. So I've always found that interesting or puzzling, and I guess it really doesn't matter the label, but it's just one of those things is autism being overdiagnosed? Are other things being overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed without that prehistory, past medical records from generations past? It's hard to really know. And I don't really think, because now in the past few generations, I mean, my parents didn't really go to the doctor as a child. They only really got to go to the doctor as an adult. I always went to the doctor as a child. My child's at the doctor all the time. So until we have all that scientific and historical data, we're probably not going to really know what these genetic markers should be till generations past. Will they eventually probably find something that can relate to an autism genetic marker? Yes, I think so. I think there's going to be enough patterns that they'll find something. They just don't know what it is yet. Something the doctor told me that I think is very, very relevant when dealing with special needs is a person may have all the symptoms of a syndrome but may not have the syndrome. So they can have all the symptoms but still not have the syndrome. Also, a person may have a syndrome but may not have all the symptoms. So you could be diagnosed with something and have that syndrome but not have all the symptoms that's on the list. So there is so many varying degrees. Keep that in mind. Each person is unique. I mean, it's not what you read. If they give you a diagnosis, and that doesn't mean you're going to experience everything on that list. Sometimes we overthink things. So with that, something that I also want to talk about is early intervention. Early intervention is really key for all children. If your child, read to your children, I mean, that one-on-one bond, they're looking for that attention from you. Read with them, do those activities together and things like that. Coloring, arts, crafts, those traditional types of things. As a mom and dad, you have to be kind of like the experts of everything. when you're going to the speech therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, if that's the case, be with them. Learn what they're doing. You can also do these things when you're at home. Speech therapy is not only words. Speech therapy is learning how to communicate. So speech therapy, you can learn things like sign language. You learn things that can help develop the tongue, the sounds, how to make those words, how to make those connections in the brain to talk. There's also technology out there. There's so much technology out there, from tech talks to, you got iPads and things like that. My kid loves the iPad. There's so much out there that you can really use to help with those communication skills. Even if it's something as simple as having a yes, no, something they can point to. It helps. They understand, ask some questions. It's a work in progress. Occupational therapy, things like utilizing your hands, eating, sensory issues. A person can be undersensitive or oversensitive. My kid was undersensitive in the taste buds. That means he'll literally eat anything, whether it's a food or non-food group, just to get those taste buds going. And then his ears were oversensitive. So that means he didn't really like large crowds, large noises, school assemblies, and things like that. The doctor described it to me as like somebody putting an air horn in your ear. That's what it was, what these noises were to him. And we ended up doing this auditory integration therapy with him, where he had headphones on for like 30 minutes a day, twice a day for a period of time. And it did take about a year after that, but it really did work for him. It helped him to get those, almost like reset. The key is that after that, he couldn't have his headphones on anymore. He just had to experience those sounds and get used to those sounds. I listened to what was on those headphones and what they're giving him. I could only stand about a minute. It was annoying. It was like a skipping record. But he just sat there happily for that half an hour listening to it. It's not approved by insurance, but it worked, and that's all I know. Physical therapy is so important, and physical therapy is something that you have to not only do at the therapist's office, you have to do at home too. For my son, it was 18 months when he learned to sit up. It was 24 months when he learned to crawl on all fours. And then I thought, crawling on all fours, you learn how to walk, anytime now. And it was close to almost 5 before I was just sitting on the couch. I'd almost gave up, and he took the first few steps. So these kids are determined. It may take them longer, but they'll get her done. And the other thing, is with IEPs, individual education plans, the key thing is work with the school, work with people, figure it out. No one person on the team can make the decision for the child. So if you're uncomfortable or somebody on the team is uncomfortable with something, don't be afraid to say, okay, I'm really not sure about this. I need some time to think about it. Let's have another meeting, or I'll get back to you on that target, and then move on to the next item on the IEP. You don't have to make all the decisions that day in that 1 hour. It's impossible sometimes. So, work together, brainstorm. If you work together as a team, you'll figure it out. Some years are more challenging than others, but you'll figure something out that you all can agree on that has the best interest of the child in mind. On my last note, I would just like to remind everyone is that of the use of the word retarded. Unfortunately, it was a diagnosis, so it's commonly used in our society as slang. And I would just like personally ask each one of you to think twice before saying it. To us, to me, it is considered slang, and I appreciate it if you just wouldn't use it around me. If you use it in your private, whatever, that's your business. But in front of me, I'll let you know. All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good day. Goodbye.